Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are at the appointed hour of 1 o'clock. So with that, I will call this Tennessee Board of Regents meeting to order, where this afternoon we'll be running through a series of committee meetings. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to Northeast State and the TCAT Elizabethton for having us here. I'm often fond of saying when we do these twice a year campus meetings, which we all love, for you all, we recognize the work that goes into this. We know this is not easy, and I always jokingly say, you're happy to see us come, but you're happier to see us go, which will be about 24 hours from now. But in the meantime, for everything you have planned for us, starting with this morning's tours and a wonderful lunch and time together, we thank you. It's very meaningful to be on our campuses. And we have actually not been to Northeast State since 2016. So as Roswell knows, there's a lot of good things that have happened here over the past few years, and the campus looks great, so thank you. Chancellor, any opening words?
Well, just to reiterate, thank you so much to Northeast State and all that you have done to prepare for us being here. This is an incredible college. There are incredible individuals working here, being run by an incredible president. So we are most appreciative that you took the time to prepare for us to be with you today. And to TCAT Elizabethton, who will partner with Dr. Tomorrow with Jeff to talk about the great things that are happening in Northeast Tennessee. We again are very thankful to be here. I have had a great 3 days here because we did cut a ribbon on our TCAT Elizabethton Boones Creek facility on Tuesday with the governor. So it is a wonderful opportunity to share all that's going on in the state of Tennessee with you here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I also want to briefly recognize, and we'll hear more about them tomorrow, we have with us the first cohort of the Chancellor's Fellowship, who have all assembled to attend this board meeting and to be part of this occasion. So welcome to you all. I had occasion to see 2 or 3 of you so far already, but what a great class and what impressive work they will continue to do for the system. And as I said, Chancellor's going to talk to us more about our Chancellor's Fellows tomorrow. So this afternoon, you guys, we have 5 committee meetings to make our way through. We will open with academic policies and programs, student life. But before I turn over the gavel, so to speak, to Regent Kyle Spurgeon, thanks to Miles Burdine, we have been informed that in his real life job as head of the Jackson, Tennessee Chamber of Commerce, Kyle Spurgeon and his team are finalists for an award as Chamber of the Year from the American Association of Chambers of Commerce. So well done.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Reynolds. That is
Well, and actually we had 2 good pieces of news, right? For Tennessee, Kyle, you're in one category, and the Memphis Chamber is in a second category. So we have 2 outstanding Tennessee chambers up for these awards.
You're absolutely correct, and appreciate you bringing that up. And just like with TBR, everything we do is built around a great team and investors and supporters, and we are happy to be a finalist. It's we haven't won, but it's kind of like making it to the Final Four or to the College World Series. That's an accomplishment in itself.
Absolutely. So, well, congratulations. We're just proud to know you.
Hey, Kyle, if you still had Vicky Bunch, you would guarantee a win.
Yeah, if somebody hadn't taken her away from me, we might have won last year, but you know.
For those who may not know, Vicky Bunch is now on the TBR team, so she's still in the family. Oh, that's right.
That's right.
Oh, with that, Regent Spurgeon, the floor is yours for you to call your committee to order.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I will start by telling everyone I apologize for not being there today. And I will also say I'm not easily intimidated, but running meetings in front of Vice Chairman Reynolds, who I think runs the best meetings I have ever been in, is certainly something I want to make sure I do correct. And so we are going to get started right now. And so I'm calling the Committee on Academic Policies, Programs, and Student Life to order. And Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Regent Burdine.
Aye.
Regent Richardson.
Aye.
Regent Roberts.
Aye.
Regent Spurgeon, you are on virtually. Can you confirm that you can simultaneously hear and speak with us and that you are alone in the room?
I can hear and speak, and I am alone in the room.
And Regent Farland.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
All right. So we do have a quorum, and we'll proceed to the first item on the agenda, and that's number one, the consent agenda. A on that is proposed revisions to TBR policy 2.03.00.04, technical college learning support. B is proposed revisions to TBR policy 3.01.01.00, student organizations. All the members were briefed on these policies at the May 28th committee chair meetings. And so are there any questions on these policy revisions? If so, Vice Chancellor Jonathan E. Reed and General Counsel Brian Lapps are proposed to address any questions. Do I hear a motion?
Second.
Sorry.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask Madam Secretary Perry to do a roll call vote.
Regent Burdine.
Aye.
Regent Roberts.
Aye.
Chairman Spurgeon.
Aye.
And Regent Barlin.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Quickly moving to number two, and that is TCAT program approvals. So for the proposed program approvals at the Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology, I would like to call on Vice Chancellor Jonathan E. Reed, and I will ask her to go through this and show us what we're doing here.
Can you all hear me better now? Thank you. I want to provide to you the TCAT program approvals, which is a routine item that comes before you. The Council on Occupational Education, COE, which is the accrediting body for our TCATs, require documentation of approval from the governing agency. Rather than go through each program in detail, those materials are in front of you for your review. And so in front of you, you have 29 program proposals and 30 program modifications that require the board's approval. I also want to highlight this will be the last board meeting where I will publicly present the TCAT programs. You all are accustomed to receiving a monthly memo from me for community college programs where they're able to benefit from a much quicker cadence of a 30-day approval process rather than the TCATs having to wait for a quarterly model. So it's effective July of this year. We're going to put them all in that memo so that TCATs can also benefit from that 30-day approval process that you all approve through that memo, and that way they can continue to be more responsive to the workforce needs and the needs of students going forward. That is my report, Chairman, and so I will ask for action on this.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. Do I hear a motion for approval?
I move for approval.
Regent Burdine, do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Madam Secretary, we are ready for another roll call vote.
Regent Burdine.
Aye.
Regent Roberts.
Aye.
Chairman Spurgeon.
Aye.
Regent Barlin.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to number three, that is accreditation summary report and overview for 2023-2024. So for additional accreditation summary and report and an overview of that, I would like to call again on Vice Chancellor Jonathan E. Reed.
Thank you. Again, this is an annual informational update to the board. This does not require any action, but it's a chance to highlight to you all of the rigorous work that our TCATs and community colleges are doing to stay in compliance with their accrediting bodies. I will start first with the community college accreditation report. All 13 community colleges remain in good standing with SAC-COC. They have all submitted a variety of compliance documents and range from a 5-year interim report, their 10-year reports, substantive changes, and monitoring reports that are required by SAC-COC. Under program accreditation, over 212 program accreditations across the state have been completed, and those activities include a range of things such as self-studies, site visits, program reviews, interim and annual reports, and 35 programs across the state have earned credential reaffirmation or continued status. Also in the area of academic audit for community colleges, 21 programs across the state have gone through the academic audit process, which included 21 degrees and 7 certificates, and they have all done well there. And then in the area of program review, 6 programs have completed program review, which includes a written report on campus or peer review, and a former evaluator report. So community colleges are all in compliance and doing really well, meeting the standards of SACCOC, which is a mark of quality and excellence that we can be proud of for all of our community colleges. If you're fine with that, I will move forward to the highlight for the TCATs in the same area. For the TCAT accreditation report, all 24 TCATs have maintained full compliance with COE standards. So again, just a hallmark of excellence around all of our colleges in the system that we can be proud of. They have all submitted their COE annual reports due last March. In terms of structural changes, final approval has been granted for the merger of TCAT Heron Carroll McKenzie, and TCAT Crossville has been renamed to TCAT Upper Cumberland in preparation for their merger. 8 TCATs have also received final reaffirmation around their changes, as well as off-campus locations. And across program accreditations, TCATs have completed 18 program accreditation activities to ensure reaffirmation or continuing accreditation. This concludes my informational report, and the takeaway is that our college presidents, their faculty and teams are doing excellent work meeting these regional and national standards for their programs.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Reed. Number 4 is a TBR strategic plan update. So for additional information on the strategic plan, I'd like to call on Executive Vice Chancellor Russ Deaton.
Thank you, Regent Spurgeon, Vice Chair Reynolds, Chancellor Tidings, members of the board. I want to talk to you about where we are with the strategic plan and to give you an update about where we've been these last 6 months. It's been a busy last 6 months for us. Carol always chooses the wrong way. Which way? The green one. There we go. And we'll begin, though, with where we are currently with the existing strategic plan. You will recall that this one was first approved in 2015, but this board engaged heavily with the redesign in 2021. Of course, the first 5 years or so of that era was interesting. You had the Focus Act, which splintered the governance of Tennessee higher ed, essentially redefining TBR as an open access system. You had the COVID pandemic and all of the social and economic disruptions that wrought. And so in 2021, we reassessed the strategic plan and homed in on these 3 pillars you see here: open access, completion, and community and workforce development. But as we've gone through these last 6 months, again, we've been very busy. Of course, we've had a steering committee that has been convened several times. I want to thank Regents Keltgen, Regent Roberts, Regent Powers, and Vice Chair Reynolds for serving on that group alongside presidents and academic and business officers and leaders outside TBR to come together about how we think about the new strategic plan for TBR. Also spent a lot of time talking to focus groups, student leaders, business leaders, community college access partners, Heirs and Achieves. Later on this summer, and I'll speak more about this later, we're going to talk to some national and state partners who have a good sense of TBR and our history and give a reality check about where we're going. All of which will then culminate in what we hope to bring back to you in September with a final plan, which I'll speak about here towards the end. But the catalyzing agent in this entire process has been that steering committee. And it's been, I think it's fair to say, a bit of an unconventional steering committee. We did not begin talking about values and strategy and visions. We sort of wrestled with some more existential questions. We asked ourselves, if you were building a community and technical college system today from the ground up without constraint, what would you want to build? What would that look like? We asked ourselves, what does Tennessee and what do Tennesseans need from TBR in the decade ahead? And then wrestled with the feedback we got throughout those meetings. So that steering committee conversation combined with those focus group conversations really then crystallized into some emerging themes. And board members, this is where probably you pick up the story, because these are the themes that you engaged with very deeply at the board and president's retreat some 2 months or so ago, where we tried to get a sense of what ideas were percolating from the steering committee, from the focus groups that we ought to reckon with as a system. We found some quotes that exemplified those themes, and that's the survey you took. That's what you wrestled with during that process, each of the presidents and the board members, to really kind of get a sense of where you stood on those issues, what you thought the priorities were. That survey was then sent to every president, all the vice presidents, and we got a lot of feedback around what those emerging themes ought to be, all of which then sort of then became the strategic priorities, which I now want to show you kind of where we are and where we're going. The first strategic priority It's going to begin with the observation that everything TBR does is geared towards getting a student into a career, a job that hopefully they can support their family. Now, whether this is via a transfer credential, the first step on a journey to a bachelor's degree, it could be an AAS, where they go straight to the workforce, some sort of certificate, or even in the workforce development area, something that's non-credit training. Everything is about how we think about how to get a student where they want to go in life to a career and meeting that need that they have. That's then incumbent upon us to think about which academic programs align to those career opportunities. How do we meet workforce demand? How do we meet student demand that's out there? And it's really incumbent upon us to think about how those things are aligned, how we connect those things, and being very clear-eyed about where the connections exist and where they don't exist. As we flesh this one out, it also makes us think about the student's experience, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. Everything that happens to a student throughout his or her time at the college ought to be reinforcing that connection, that alignment between what we're teaching, how we're training them intellectually and technically with what they want to do in their career. Some of those are in classroom experiences, whether it's an apprenticeship, perhaps it's practicing AI fluency, perhaps it's something in the high impact practice space that impacts how they go about their academic experience. Whatever it is, all that has to be geared towards that alignment. Or even ideas outside the classroom, how we advise students, and just in general the way we help them become who they want to be as a professional and as an adult. That's part of this process, all of which then sort of comes together for the first priority, is that it's incumbent upon us to connect academic pathways and the student experience to career opportunities. That really is all about the alignment challenge and how we connect everything about what the student encounters in the college with the ultimate goal of getting to their career or the next step in their career. In the lower right, you see a couple of quotes, some of which came from you. Again, that survey we took, the interactions with you, we heard loud and clear. So some of the exemplar quotes that became these ideas, you will see here from business and industry leaders and presidents and board members. The second of the three strategic priorities begins with how we design and build our colleges, how we design them with students in mind, and really centering the student experience in everything that we do. Student success ought to be at the center of everything we build about the college. Sort of harkens back to that question that the first steering committee wrestled with, is that if you were building a college from scratch today, how would you build it? If you were not constrained by what had been, or what's not feasible, or what's too expensive. All of that, though, speaks to how we build the college, how we design processes, both that students face directly. Perhaps these are things in the onboarding process, how we think about admissions, how we think about financial aid, perhaps in their pathway pursuits, how we think about when and where we offer courses, who teaches and where. Perhaps it's in the transfer space, career services. All of these things that impact the student's journey that we build processes for, either technical processes or mechanical processes that then speak to how we serve students and serve all students. I'm thinking now about the feedback we got from TBR staff and SJ leaders about the accessibility challenge and how we meet every student where they are and design processes for everybody. This also manifests itself in indirect processes, things that the student doesn't see directly necessarily, but still impact their journey quite a bit. I'm thinking now about finance processes, how people pay bills, how we do the purge process, how we communicate between departments to serve students, IT, data, you name it. Everything about the college has to be designed to really impact that student's journey and how they can get to where they want to go ultimately in their career. So all that then coalesces into the second theme, which is improving the college processes that we deploy that shape the student's journey. Fundamentally, this is about rethinking and redesigning things that may not be working well or that are not working for the benefit of the student and his or her success primarily. Again, direct and indirect things that impact the student's journey to their ultimate goal. Thirdly and lastly, this priority begins with the idea that TBR is a pretty complex ecosystem, and we exist within an equally complex higher education policy landscape. Virtually everything we do needs effective partnerships, as evidenced by this very process, where we sought input from all sorts of folks inside and outside TBR. Everything we do is with partners, and if we are functioning well, these act as and I'll use maybe a phrase that Regent Verdun might like here, a full force multiplier for TBR, one that helps us maximize our resources and efforts when we're working in concert and functioning well with our partners. This is not just true with external relationships, it's true with internal relationships. TBR was never designed to be a loose confederation of 37 colleges. It was built to be an interconnected system that utilizes its capacity, its expertise, and its strengths to help colleges and help students succeed in their ultimate journey. So this last theme is really about collaboration, how we collaborate both within the system and with partners to maximize our resources and our efforts to ultimately achieve student success. Again, it relies on that interconnectedness of TBR, our virtue as a system, and you see quotes that we pulled from the board members, from presidents, that exemplify what that would look like. Now, finally, the architecture here. This initial idea, and again, we're not asking you for approval today, this is information, essentially a first read, but the idea here is that we would still rely on our existing mission statement, student success and workforce development. We would also maintain the 3 pillars that are in the current strategic plan: open access, completion, community, and workforce development. Though, and actually Vice Chair Reynolds and I were joking about this, those sort of sometimes feel very sort of spiritual or scriptural. They don't always tell you what to do, but they're important to our identity. Obviously, they're important to our philosophy. But the injection of these new priorities begin to give us some actionable ideas to ingest into the plan and give us a better sense of then what to do, how to spend our time, resources, and energy as we go forward. And then to buttress those with progress and metrics, much like we do now with the dashboard. So again, been a busy 6 months to now move to the last 2 parts of that slide in front of you later on this summer. If we get good feedback today, we want to begin to test drive these ideas with state partners from different state agencies, different parts of the higher ed ecosystem, and with national partners. We have set up conversations with many think tanks around the U.S. who know TBR, know Tennessee, and know our history and context very well, and can give us a reality check on where we're going. The SHIO that Dr. Gentile is a part of is one of those partners. The National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, NCHEMS, which is a historically partner of TBR in Tennessee. The Community College Research Center is one, and ATD, our partners there. All of whom, again, have worked with us, worked in Tennessee for decades, and know us and can give us some perspective. So again, the idea today is to get feedback on where we're going that tries to synthesize the feedback we heard from you, from the presidents, from our focus groups. And if we are moving in the right direction, I want to bring back to you in September a fully developed plan that it can be taken up for action. The idea also is to maintain the identity of the plan as an interactive infographic. It is not a 15-page narrative we're going to ask you to read, nothing wrong with those. We want this, though, to be a plan that people engage with, that they click through, that they understand, that they can feel and touch, and do so in real time on the internet. It's also a plan we hope is flexible. Things will ebb and flow over time. Not the pillars, not the priorities, but what we're doing to manifest and fulfill those. So over time, we hope it's indeed flexible, where each year we bring back to you, here's how we're trying to fulfill the imperatives of that strategic plan. With that, Regent Spurgeon, I'll turn it back over to you, or happy to take questions from the board.
Anyone have any questions for Dr. Deaton?
If I could, Russ, and forgive me, my voice is kind of getting out of me.
That's okay.
You had mentioned previously that these think tanks that are coming up in summer, you're hoping to get a reality check.
Yeah.
Is there any direction specifically that you're trying to aim? Are we asking sort of broad statements from a couple different perspectives? Are we trying to specialize in what these think tanks are entirely surrounding? What's the strategy there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So really want to first see if we're missing anything. These entities really have a pulse on what's happening nationally. They know what's happening in other states. They are going to see some common themes probably in what we're doing here. But do they sense that we're missing something? Do they sense that what we're doing as an open access system is moving in the direction that is best for us? They'll know some of the historical context here, which might help as well. Plus, the individuals involved, again, they're longtime friends, and I think they're going to be honest with us. They're not going to tell us what we want to hear. That's the last thing I would want. I want them to tell us what they think. So not a specific component or element I want to ask them about, but just getting a sense overall of, is this moving in the right direction? And importantly, how do you sustain this? How do you make this where it's a living, breathing thing that we actually can act on? How do we make it where it's actionable over time? I really want to get their perspective on that as well.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, this reality check is more in trying to connect the idea to the grounded reality. Like, you're not necessarily looking for a reality check of, is this a good or bad idea, but necessarily like, where's the connection to our experience as we live it now?
Sure, that's fair.
Okay. The phrasing of reality check, I was sort of curious what direction we were headed, but that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Deaton, I have a question actually of Dr. Gentile on this, because THEC's in your own strategic planning process as well. So from your knowledge of this, and we've been grateful to have a couple of your team at the table with us in our steering committee, which has been most helpful, but kind of your initial gut reaction to this, both as head of THEC and knowing the process you're going through and also serving with us here on this board.
Thank you, Chairman Reynolds. First of all, I want to thank TBR and the team for including THEC so closely in all of this, and we've been doing it vice versa. But also I know that Dr. Deaton and Amanda Clefane, my Chief Strategy Officer, are touching base very often to discuss this. We've got TBR's boards working on a strategic plan, UT right now, State Board of Education also, and then THEC. All of us are doing so right now, knowing and understanding that we'll have a new governor administration in about a year and a half. So making this as flexible as it can be, which is what TBR is doing here, I just want to applaud that, knowing that things may change coming down the pike as to priorities for the state, but this is broad enough and flexible enough to allow for us to paint a picture for everyone externally. This is where we need to go, and we're up for making changes as needed. When it comes to our master plan, we're thinking about all state institutions and also doing the same thing with the state agencies and the workforce. And so I just want to applaud TPR for this approach right here so far. Yeah.
Any other questions for Dr. Deaton?
No question, just comment. Very well done. Thanks for the update.
Thank you, sir.
Regent Burdine. Well, Dr. Deaton, take a quick breath. You're going to be right back up. But number 5 is we were slated to hear an informational update regarding learning support and the Tennessee Coaching Project. However, Dr. Deaton has advised me that Dr. Moreland could not be with us today, so we will hear more about these initiatives at a later date. Number 6 is dual enrollment, and Dr. Deaton, I guess getting a breath, that you didn't get very long to do that, so you're back up.
That's okay. That was sufficient. Thank you, Regent Spurgeon. Well, this topic is one that has really increased in salience and importance these last few months and years. Partly because, as you'll see in a moment here, just the rapidly growing numbers of dual enrollment students, the rising costs, which I know is a topic that THEC and the state have looked into a lot, and just general questions about its effectiveness as a state policy tool. THEC and Department of Education are both working in concert with TBR to delve deeply into these questions and try to figure out a way to make dual enrollment more effective, more sustainable. In fact, and I'm going to mess this up, Stephen, the title, but there's a strategy group that's been meeting that THEC has convened. It's got State Board of Ed, Department of Ed, THEC, TBR, and some private partners that's wrestling with some dual enrollment questions. So that's an ongoing effort of which we are a part and happy to do so. This presentation is going to draw from the very deep reservoir of insight and analysis that TBR has about dual enrollment in a way that hopefully sheds light on some of the questions that group is wrestling with, that the collective is wrestling with about dual enrollment and its effectiveness and sustainability. This is the first in a 2-part series, so to speak. So after we kind of level set today, going to go through some data, some of the policy issues that are before the state and TBR. In September, we're going to ask Vice Chancellor Troy Grant in Strategic Enrollment Management to then come talk about what we then do about this. How do we approach this policy challenge in a way that takes advantage of our capacity, our SIM structure, our other resources in ways that can help move the needle on dual enrollment. So today's level setting, let's lay the groundwork, know where we are, identify what the right challenges are. In September, we're going to come back and really dig into what it is that we can potentially do about it. So first, a little level setting, a little landscape scan. Now, dual enrollment, remember, is perhaps the most famous of what's called an EPSO, an early post-secondary opportunity. EPSOs are all sorts of manner of interactions where students can take AP courses and dual credit and CLEP courses to get early college credit. Dual enrollment, of course, is the most high profile, the most famous one of those. It simply refers to a college course that is taken by a high school student that counts for credit in both contexts. The history here is important because this goes way back to the origins of the lottery scholarship in 2003. When the lottery scholarship was designed, it was also designed not just to be that central hope scholarship, which is financial aid for students attending public and private colleges, but there was also a push to add a college access piece, a dual enrollment grant. That's a key part of the lottery scholarship program and that suite of family of programs. All told, there are around 38,000 students now taking dual enrollment at TBR colleges. More to come on that here in a moment. That's out of about 45,000 dual enrollment students statewide. So there is some activity at public and private universities, but about 85% of this or so is at TBR. This is also a really important tool of state policy. The General Assembly has put a lot of attention on expanding access and funding opportunities for dual enrollment the last few years. Currently, now, high school students in grades 9 through 12 can take dual enrollment at a TCAP, and in grades 11 and 12 at a community college. And that expansion in the early high school grades is a fairly recent vintage. The grant also covers at a TCAP up to 3 trimesters of a program, which is a typical length of most diploma programs, or 1,296 clock hours if you want to know the specific number. It also fully funds 5 community college courses and partially funds 5 more courses at a community college. So very broad access, very broad financial aid availability in the dual enrollment grant, covering all tuition and fees, a key tool to ensuring access to it. Dual enrollment is also a very important plank in education policy more broadly. It is a key part of K-12 accountability funding mechanisms. LEAs are essentially incentivized to open up more opportunities for their students to take any EPSO, but particularly dual enrollment. It is also a key plank in higher education finance policy. The outcomes-based funding formula that THEC runs, one of the 10 outcomes that community colleges are funded on is dual enrollment, alongside degrees and transfer and workforce training, etc. So it is a crucial element, not just to student access, but to colleges' missions and their finances. And finally, I mentioned there is that THEC-led strategic direction group that's trying to wrestle with where dual enrollment is going in the future. So, out of all that, we have tried to distill 4 themes about dual enrollment that we'll talk about here one by one. We'll be brief on each one to try to get at what is it that we can see and learn about dual enrollment, from how much growth is happening, what are the pathways on that growth, and what students are taking, how much success they're seeing in those courses, and then what happens to them after high school. Again, all of which are tied to those questions that have emerged from this conglomerate that's looking into dual enrollment more deeply. So the first one, thinking about the growth of dual enrollment. Some of this will be familiar to you. We have sprinkled some of this data in presentations in years past, but today we bring it all together. Again, around 38,000 dual enrollment students at TBR colleges, with significant growth since the pandemic the last 4 or 5 years. In part reflecting greater demand, in part reflecting those state policy changes we talked about earlier, where the General Assembly has expanded the ability to access dual enrollment across, in some cases, freshman, sophomore year of college. You see in particular the TCATs going from around 5,000 or so in 2020 to well over 15,000 students now. Just tremendous growth across the sectors. Now 38,000 students all told at TBR. Dual enrollment students are essentially 1/3 of all TBR headcounts. 1/3. 10 years ago, about 1 in 7 or so. Now it's about 1/3. It's nearly half of TCAT headcount across the entire sector that's dual enrollment. As you peer into that a little bit further, and I'll use age as a proxy for grade in high school, but you see growth really across demographics. On the left-hand side, community college dual enrollment has trended up, particularly in those junior and senior years. That's where the availability of the grant is located. and at the TCATs really in every grade or every age group throughout that time period. To give you a sense of the 15-year-olds, the red dot from the bottom of that graph, there were about 300 maybe students 5 years ago. There are now 3,000 15-year-olds, essentially a freshman in high school pursuing dual enrollment across the TCATs. Second point, second theme, how we think about the pathways for dual enrollment students. First is, let's talk about what courses they take. This pie chart shows you the most common community college dual enrollment courses. And most of these are very intuitive. It's the English and the math and the history and the psychology. That's what you see sort of moving clockwise from the top. So about 2/3 of courses overall are in those top 10 areas. English and math alone are nearly half of this. Overall, though, you see about 78% of all these courses are within the general education core. Now that's important because that means that those courses, by definition, are part of almost every degree pathway in college. These are part of transfer pathways, obviously. They're also part of AAS degrees and those 15 hours you have to take there. So these courses are sometimes exploratory, but they are in part of almost every degree pathway a student would choose at a community college. On the TCAT side, you see a lot of the typical programs in dual enrollment, welding, auto, CIT, etc. The alignment calculus is a bit different here, though. Unlike the community colleges where you have an a la carte approach, and those courses in general education typically can be very flexible and can go in any program. If you're in welding tech, say, as dual enrollment, you can't exactly use that if you go into a CIT program down the road at a TCAT. So a bit of a different calculus on the alignment challenge, less course focused, more programmatic focused here. So that's one challenge we have on dual enrollment. Third theme, success. Now, dual enrollment students typically are better prepared than their non-dual enrollment counterparts. That's intuitive. That's why they're taking college courses. But we see dual enrollment students earning A's at a higher prevalence, earning passing grades at a higher rate, higher than the typical community college courses, not by much, by a little. We also see them progressing quite a bit towards a credential. So let me put some numbers on this middle section here. At a TCAT, the average dual enrollment student will leave high school with around 230 or so clock hours. Now, if you think about the average or the typical 3-trimester diploma, which is 1,296 hours, that 220 represents about 16-17% of that overall credential. So they're about 1/6 of the way through a typical TCAT program on average. That's pretty good. Similarly at the community colleges, the average community college dual enrollment student takes about 11 credit hours by the time they finish high school. Out of a 60-hour program, again, about 18% of that program overall. So on average, a dual enrollment student is coming out of high school with about almost 1/5 of their entire program completed across both sectors. There's a particular type of dual enrollment that is applicable in the middle college space. Essentially, in Regent Roberts can probably speak a lot to this. Programs that are sort of concurrent enrollment for a high school student taking both their college degree and high school at the same time. Middle colleges rely a lot on the dual enrollment grant. This is where the bulk of the completion and acceleration happens for students completing a credential, because they're singularly focused on that while they're in high school. In fact, Regent Varlin, it was pretty cool when we were at Pell City's graduation. Dr. Wise highlighted it must have been 25 or so, Anthony, of the high school students with their white stoles about to get their Pell City credential that night, and I guess a week later or so graduate high school. It was really neat, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. There's about 600 of those students across the state where that happens. Now, to put that in perspective, we graduate 22,000 students a year. So about 1 in every 37 or so is a student who's a middle college graduate who's getting their college diploma most often before they get their high school diploma. Yeah, most of whom then go into the workforce or go to college. So again, a lot of success here across the board. The fourth theme, what happens after high school is over? This is a chart you've seen before. This is going to look at, for every 100 dual enrollment students, what happens to them after high school. So this is community colleges first. So what's in blue there? That means of all of our community college dual enrollment students, 20% will enroll seamlessly at a community college after their high school experience. Another 2% will enroll at a TCAT, and 48% will go to some university, public or private, in-state or out-of-state somewhere. So all told, about a 70% college going rate right out of high school for the community college dual enrollment cohort. That's pretty good. It's higher than the overall college going rate. But the takeaway to this message is what's happening in those red squares. 30% of community college dual enrollment students do not seamlessly enroll in higher ed after high school. As we think about what we want to talk about in September with Vice Chancellor Grant and how we strategically attack this problem, that's job number one right there. How do we get more students to then take that dual enrollment credit and get into college? So again, about a 70% college going rate. You sure can.
Sorry, not on this
No problem.
committee. But the seamlessly there means what I assume it means.
Right after, exactly, very next year. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, very next year.
Dr. Deaton?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Okay. Go forward. I'm sorry.
To the TCAT one?
Yeah. I was joking. Sorry. The red. I was kidding.
Can you cut his mic off, please?
We go way back. Of the red one, of the 30%, that's. Is there any bit of that share that's they walked out with that credential in high school and therefore did not?
Small,
very
yeah.
small.
So again, of the 600 students overall who will complete that credential in high school, and again, about roughly 100 of that's TCAT, about 500 is community college. So some, but probably not enough to really impact the overall number
So that
very
30%
much.
is still.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
it is,
you.
yeah. And we'll get into more about what happens to them here in a moment because there's more to the story, as Paul Harvey would say.
My apologies.
That's okay. You've reached your limit for the day, Regent Gentile. So on the TCAT side, similar story, a little more stark data here. Again, of all TCAT dual enrollment students, about 12% will seamlessly enroll at a community college. About 21% seamlessly enroll at a TCAT. So overall, about 1/3 go on straight to college. The other 2/3, we cannot see their enrollment records. Now, do some go in the military? Yes. Do some go out of state where we can't see them because of some peculiarities in TCAT out-of-state data? Yes. But overall, even if that were accounted for, we have a college-going issue where there is a lot of opportunity to get more of these students who encountered higher ed while in high school through TCAT dual enrollment, but do not go on to higher education after they finish. Now, the dual enrollment college goers and the dual enrollment non-college goers, they differ in some important ways, obviously. Some of this will be intuitive, but on average, those who go on to college after dual enrollment took more courses in high school during that experience. They're more likely to be female and white, and they had better academic preparation, higher ACT scores, higher GPAs, things of that nature. So some of that is, again, intuitive. But all of this, though, begs the question of what happens to those who do not seamlessly enroll. So let's break this down in several ways. First, let's go back to that 70% number from a few slides ago. That was the seamless enrollment number, as Regent Harrell clarified. If you, though, track that cohort and give them, say, 10 years to figure out whether they can go to college, eventually, of those 30 who don't, 10 of them eventually will go to higher ed. Perhaps a year or two later, maybe 5 years later, some 10 years later. But the college going rate moves from 70 to about 80% over time. So some of them don't seamlessly enroll, but find their way there eventually. The employment rates, though, are very different. Of the dual enrollment students who do not go to college, we can see about 2/3 of them in the wage records from Dr. Moreland's Career Start Here dashboard. We find 78% of the dual enrollment college goers in the wage data, which says two things. First is that, and this has always been true anecdotally, but we have some data now, our students in higher ed at TBR, most of them work, okay? And this is actually the subject of a upcoming research project we're working on to understand more fulsomely what is the labor profile of our students who are currently working to support themselves or their families or their education. Most students work. We're going to figure out exactly what the details are later on. But we also, though, see more of them working when they're in college than those who didn't go to college. Now, perhaps because they have to pay for college, but the employment rates are higher. For those that don't, for those that did not go to higher ed, that last point shows you the wages. We see them in the labor data, with an average wage, though, of over about $22,000, which suggests part-time enrollment or low-wage employment at least. So again, it is not as if what they achieved in high school with a sampling of dual enrollment somehow prepares them for a career. It does not. It's an important first step, but it's incomplete.
Sorry, one more.
Yes, sir.
Do we know how that wage number compares to high school graduates, non-DE, who do not go to college?
That is knowable.
But we
We
don't
don't know it right now, but we can get that for you, Regent Harrell. So all of this is gleaned, this is a reminder, from data that is quite rich and expansive on TBR's website that looks into dual enrollment both at community colleges and at TCATS. And we also have a third dashboard that looks at all EPSO activity and gets a sense of how high school students are availing themselves of all sorts of EPSOs. So all this is very rich data that's publicly available. So now, what happens next? So as that group is thinking about what is the strategic purpose of dual enrollment, how do we sustain it, make it more effective, this is essentially TBR's stake in the ground about what we think dual enrollment's strategic mission ought to be, what it's been used to do, what it should be doing. It serves several purposes. First is a tool of exploration, allowing a student to connect with higher ed somehow, some way, to begin to explore college and career. Whether it's at a general education course at a community college or a particular TCAP program. That's valuable. I've got 3 high school students in my house right now, and that's a valuable tool for them to think about what they want to do with their future career. Secondly, is that it helps prepare students and get over perhaps some mindset barriers about higher ed. If you harken back to 2003, this was a key part of the state policy debate. Can dual enrollment serve as a tool to convince that either marginally qualified student or perhaps student who's not very confident about their ability in higher ed, that they can cut it and they can go to college. Dual enrollment ought to help overcome that mindset barrier where it exists. It ought to help get students prepared for higher education where they know they can do the work. That's a key part of its utility. And then finally, succeeding, getting students to accelerate towards a credential. We see that with that middle college student who goes and gets the full degree. You also see it where we have most of our students getting roughly 20% of their credential completed while they're in high school through dual enrollment. So that's fulfilling that part of the mission of the dual enrollment grant. So wrapping all that up, what do we do now? And sort of pointing towards what's going to come in September. We think about this issue on 3 levels. First, the state policy level. How can we maintain broad access to financial aid, dual enrollment? That's been a key pillar of state policy from the General Assembly for a long time now. How do you maintain that broad access tool? And importantly, and this has been a big topic of conversation within that strategic planning group, is how do you ensure the utility of those credits? And this is where a lot of our SIM strategies about advising and showing students where they can use those credits comes into play. That TBR strategy of deploying those SIM resources, thinking about how advising can connect with dual enrollment students to show them what's possible, to talk about how those credits can be used in academic degree programs. And on the finance side, leveraging dual enrollment because it is, again, one of the 10 elements of the outcomes-based formula for our colleges. It ought to be on the radar of every CFO across the community colleges. And then finally, of course, at the local college level, everything boils down to the health of the relationships between the college and the LEA and the high school. How do we best help the capacity of colleges to strengthen those relationships, helping them train faculty where necessary, but helping them maintain that connection between the LEA, the high school, and the college. With that, Regent Spurgeon, I'll turn it back to you or open it up for questions from the floor.
Do we have any questions? Dr. Deaton and Vice Chancellor Reed, I think all of us listening recognize that what you two have presented, these are summaries. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes on behind that to get there. So just thank you to both of you and your teams for pulling this together and making it so concise so we can see it. But just to let you know, we all recognize a tremendous amount of work just to get to this point. So thank you and well done.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any further business to come before this committee? Hearing none, the Committee on Academic Policies and Programs and Student Life for the Tennessee Board of Regents stands adjourned.
Thank you, Regent Spurgeon, and to the committee, well done. Good information this afternoon. I'm going to look to Mariah on our Committee on Finance and Business Operations and see if Regent White is with us.
I am here.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Tom, if you are ready then, let me turn the gavel, so to speak, over to you. We've just completed academic affairs, obviously, so you're up next with finance and business operations.
Sounds great. I appreciate you the indulgence for allowing me to call in from a family vacation here.
Thank you. Just hope you're enjoying yourself. Thank you.
I am, and I bet you all are jealous of the view I have right now. But so I'll go ahead and call the Committee on Finance and Business Operations to order, and I'll ask Secretary Perry to please call the roll.
Regent George,
Here.
Regent Harrell,
Present.
Regent Kastner.
Here.
Chairman White, can you confirm that you can simultaneously hear and speak with us in the meeting and that you are alone in the room?
Yes, and I am alone here in the room.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So we've got 2 agenda items to go through. And the first agenda item is the review and consideration of the proposed operating budgets for the 2025-2026 fiscal year and approval of the finalized estimated budgets of the 2024-2025 fiscal year. And I'll call on Vice Chancellor Fox to discuss, please.
All right. Thank you, Chairman White and members of the board. Before we get into the formal agenda today, if I may, I would like to provide one staffing update this afternoon. Renee Stewart, our Associate Vice Chancellor of Finance, retired at the end of May after 30 years with TBR and 38 total years with the state. So although I'm sure she is not watching today, I would like to publicly thank her for her dedication to the system and the state. And on that note, in addition, I would like to introduce our new Associate Vice Chancellor of Finance, Valerie Greenwood. She's in the audience today. Valerie, if you'll stand up and wave. Valerie has been with TBR 7 years, most recently in the Senior Financial Analyst role. Prior to that, she spent 8 years at Tennessee Tech as the Director of Accounting and 8 years as a State Auditor for colleges and universities. So we're very excited to have her in this new role. Congrats, Valerie. Now, on to the business. So the first item on the finance agenda today is the routine review and consideration of approval of the FY25 estimated budget and the FY26 proposed budget. The supplementary documents were included in your materials in advance of today's meeting. In the interest of time, I will not read every data point on the following slides, but I will highlight key points as we move through this presentation. Before we dive into the budget information, I do want to briefly review the budget process. Working within the individual institution's shared governance process, each president has the responsibility and full authority to propose a budget to the chancellor and the board. Colleges generally receive the draft operating state appropriation amount recommended for their institution in the governor's budget proposal in the spring each year. The recommendation in the governor's budget is normally calculated based on the THEC funding formula outcomes. Colleges use this information to make some calculated assumptions when preparing their proposed budgets. Effective for FY26 forward, THEC will be setting the binding tuition range at their winter meeting, which means campuses will now have upcoming tuition information as the proposed budget is being developed and prepared, rather than after. However, some other assumptions still must be made due to timing. Those include changes in enrollment, workforce development activity, and grant activity. Colleges follow their own internal processes for budget development, and this will often include input and requests from department budget managers on their campuses, budget hearings with campus leadership, and will conclude with decisions by campus leadership that reflect the priorities of their institutions. This process normally starts in January and February and concludes with the college's budget submittal to the TBR system office in early May. TBR staff then review and consolidate the budget information and present it to the board. After board approval, the budget information is forwarded to THEC as well as Finance and Administration. We prepare 3 budgets each year, and these budgets include the proposed or May original budget, the revised or October budget, and the estimated budget. Next slide. Today, I'm presenting 2 of those 3 budgets for your action. We have the estimated budget for FY25 as well as the proposed budget for FY26. The estimated budget is the last budget for the current fiscal year. It includes final adjustments to the current year budget and is the budget against which final year-end actual amounts are compared. The proposed budget is based on the level of state funds recommended in the governor's proposed budget, as well as early estimates of factors such as enrollment growth and availability of federal funds. The proposed budget does not recognize factors such as changes in the level of grant or revenue contract activity or final adjustments required by state budget action. The revised budget is presented to the board in December, and that budget will take these and other changes into account. The following slide will provide a high-level summary comparing the FY26 proposed budget, and that's the slide that's on your screen right now, preparing the proposed budget to the current year estimated budget and the differences between the two. As I noted earlier, I'm not going to read you all the info on these slides, but I will highlight some notable changes on each slide. As a general rule, TBR staff considers a 10% change in either direction as our established threshold, and we do not require colleges to provide detailed explanations for these types of changes. The first slide we have on the screen now is a comparison of the current FY25 estimated revenue versus the FY26 proposed revenue, showing the year-over-year change. Please press pause on that state appropriation line, as that will be covered in more detail on the next slide. As we do not have any change that meet the threshold here, I will just briefly draw your attention to the overall revenue change from estimated to proposed, and that shows a 1% increase noted on the bottom. Next slide, please. The previous slide noted the state appropriation increased roughly 4% comparing FY25 estimated to FY26 proposed. This slide is showing you the reconciliation of those appropriations, including reductions for prior year non-recurring initiatives, which in the case of this slide, the $88,300 was a risk management premium adjustment in FY25. And the additions include a partial salary pool of 2.6%, group insurance, new initiatives, and outcome growth. Next slide, please. Slide 6 shows expenditures by function. The 11% increase shown in academic support is mostly attributed to an increased expense at 3 of our community colleges who have either reorganized departments and shifted expense from one program type to another, or added positions and/or equipment to increase capacity in areas such as IT support for students and faculty professional development. You will note the modest growth in expenditures of 5% total, which does again include a 2.6% salary pool. Next slide, please. Slide 7 is showing you expenditures by classification. This is again showing the overall increase in expenditures by 5%. You will note a 17% increase in travel and a 23% decrease in capital outlay. The travel increase is mostly due to the addition of the Global Studies program previously operated at Pellissippi State being relocated to the system office, and then general professional development travel returning to pre-pandemic levels. The decrease in capital outlay is attributed to one community college, Pellissippi State, who had a decrease of $1.2 million in FY26 due mostly to the receipt of a capital gift for their aviation program in FY25 that was non-recurring, as well as one TCAT Livingston, who had a $1 million decrease due to purchase of equipment for new programs that started in FY25. These were partially offset by an increase in capital outlay budget by Nashville State in 26 for purchase of new technology and updating instructional equipment. Next slide, please. The slide provides a summary that includes unrestricted and restricted fund expenditures and transfers. A 4% overall decrease in expenditure is reflected when restricted funds are included. Transfers also decreased significantly for proposed, and we'll discuss that on the next slide. Total budget expenditures for unrestricted and restricted for proposed FY26 are roughly $1.5 billion, which is down $69.8 million from the current year. Next slide, please. This slide breaks down the transfer activity, or the transfer of carryover funds from the previous fiscal year. These are non-recurring funds. Normally, these carryover funds are budgeted as a transfer to plant funds in October or April for non-recurring investment in physical plant and equipment. The retirement of indebtedness change is due to debt retirement of $250,000 at Walter State for their Greene County expansion project. For unexpended plant and renewal and replacement, large transfers to unexpended plant and renewal and replacement funds in the estimated budget were made to increase reserves so that funds are available for future capital projects, physical plant improvements, and equipment and future capital needs. Transfers to reserve are common and are expected of our colleges to remain fiscally responsible. Next slide, please. This chart shows a change in beginning fund balance to ending fund balance in FY26 proposed budget. The overall net change is shown as a decrease of $26.4 million, but is primarily attributed to the institution's budgeting to transfer carryover funds to plant funds for future equipment and capital needs. When we look strictly at revenues versus expense, excluding the transfers, the colleges show a positive net change of approximately $15.6 million. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the total number and type of authorized positions for FY26. With approval of the budget, the board will be authorizing grand total positions for the system office of 7,290. This is an increase of 162 positions, or a 2% increase compared to FY25. Almost done, I promise. Next slide. This slide provides a final summary of the FY25 and FY26 proposed budgets that are before you today for approval. However, before we ask for your approval, we need to include some information related to the locally governed institutions, or the LGI budgets. As you are aware, these are the 6 public universities that are not part of the UT system. Next slide, please. As you will recall, under the Focus Act, we are required to consider the LGI budgets, and that consideration is limited to those matters that are necessary to fulfill existing debt covenants, representations, agreements, and obligations under financing agreements entered into with the Tennessee State School Bond Authority. Next slide, please. To that end, if I can turn my page, university budgets have been received and reviewed in accordance with TBR policy 4.01.00.05, consideration of university budgets, and have been determined to meet debt service coverage requirements, have been found to be mathematically correct and internally consistent, and universities have certified compliance with the required representations. Except as noted, no judgments have been made regarding university budgets. Chairman, university budgets are recommended for approval as being in compliance with the above TBR policy. Additionally, staff recommend approval of the FY25 estimated budget and the FY26 proposed budget for the TBR system as presented. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. Any questions?
I have a question. It's actually, no, I don't have a question. I have a comment. I want to thank Alicia and her team for not just reviewing the university budgets, but the substantial amount of work they put into TSU this year, where I can look at this data now and know that it's had really good hands on the process for guidance and support. So thank you, Chancellor Tidings as well, to help that institution along this year.
Said.
Thank you.
This is Jeremy. Since you said, I would also add that I, through the budget considerations and the various information there, I've had lots of questions, and just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Fox for being willing to spend whatever time I needed, because it's been a lot to answer the questions that I had. So just thank you.
That's what I'm here for. Very, very welcome.
Anything else? If not, is there a motion to approve the proposed operating budgets for the 2025-2026 fiscal year and approval of the finalized estimated budgets for the 24-25 fiscal year? And please note that this will include approval of the LGI budgets as required by board policy. Is there a motion, please?
I'll make the motion. Jeremy.
I'll second.
Great. We have a motion and a second. This is going to require a roll call vote. So Secretary Perry, please call the roll.
Regent George.
Aye.
Regent Harrell.
Aye.
Regent Kastner.
Aye.
Chairman White.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Oops. All right. Now we're going to go to our second item. And this is the final item. And it is the review and review and consider the capital budget recommendations for the 26-27 fiscal year. And I'll call on Executive Director Dick Tracy to present.
Thank you, Chairman White and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. For your consideration, I'd like to present the staff's recommendation for the 26-27 Tennessee Board of Regents capital budget request. We'll present the recommendations in 3 classifications of projects: capital outlay projects, capital maintenance projects, and disclosure projects. Will also prevent the new THEC requirements and criteria based on the amended TCA Section 49-7-201. Please direct your attention to the screens of the materials provided before you. Our three classifications are capital outlay projects, capital maintenance projects, and project disclosures. The project disclosures are those projects that are funded with non-state appropriations. Next slide. The capital outlay projects have been objectively analyzed for relative priority based on the new THEC criteria in the project category shown on the left. Each project will now be categorized onto one of the four categories shown as unshown. All TBR projects presented are in the workforce development. THEC will then establish a list of projects that are consistent with the THEC capital projects policy using the listed criteria on the right. The projects submitted to THEC must be prioritized. The projects will then be presented to the THEC Commission for action at the fall quarterly meeting in November. It should be noted that pursuant to amended TCA 49, the THEC will not score the project submissions. However, they may deem a submittal insufficient for inclusion in the recommendation. The capital outlay projects are shown on the left. The recommended projects address TBR priorities of workforce, industry, training, and development, and are nested within the state's industry focus areas of healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, informational technology, aerospace, sustainable energy, and automotive. The projects on the right are projects that are listed as future potential out-year projects and are not included in the outlay recommended funding. We're recommending funding 8 outlay projects for 26-27 as shown. The total of the list being recommended is $449 million. When adjusted by the match contribution required by the institutions, the capital outlay request is $431,040,000. Institutions need to minimum match to be evaluated. The match component receives a pass-fail designation. Also important is that we maintain our existing facilities. We continue to make funding of capital maintenance a high priority. With approximately 11 million square feet of E&G space across 40 campuses and off-site campus operations, we have a constant and growing need for capital maintenance funding. We've been working carefully to address the major needs of our systems. The capital maintenance funding formula produces an annual THEC target of $80,770,000. This annual target number is a level of capital maintenance funding for our buildings and infrastructure that we need to strive for each year. We're recommending 35 projects. These projects total $80,510,000. In the annual renewal request, there are an additional 22 additional maintenance projects for another $48,050,000. The total of all submitted capital maintenance projects was $128,560,000. The next slide shows a 5-year estimate for outlay and maintenance. These are using either historical data, the funding formula, or looking at future projects that may come up in the future outlay years, but they're not defined as specific projects. Next, we show the project disclosures. Again, these are projects that are funded with local funds, grants, gifts that have to be disclosed in the projects if the campus would like to bring those forward in the upcoming capital outlay year. This slide gives a recap of the staff recommendations for the 26-27 capital budget request for a total of $529,510,000. These recommendations are presented for your consideration and approval. Chairman White, that completes the staff presentation for the capital budget recommendations.
Great, thank you, Dick. Any questions for Dick?
I have a question. Just a quick question. Sure. I think it will just require clarification, but there were 4 categories of projects. Is that right?
4 categories?
Yeah.
And there's 3. We have
3 categories?
Yes, we have that. Outlay, maintenance, and the disclosed projects.
Okay, there was something where you were saying that it's sort of pass-fail, but it's not prioritized. But within those categories, is there a prioritization?
Not in those categories.
Can you go back to that?
Sure. If you'll go back, I think it's on page 2. The THEC has.
Right there.
THEC in the.
It wasn't the classifications. I was talking about the categories. So there are 4 between workforce.
Oh,
research.
yes, and those are the categories that are from the THEC
Okay,
requirements,
and
right?
within those, I was just wondering if there's prioritization among those, or are they seen as equal? How does that work?
In ours, there's no priority. We look at the total projects.
Okay.
And then we rated those based off of, we're looking at the overall need for the site, as well as other information we've gathered from the master planner for the need for that region.
Okay, thank you.
Dick, if I could just add to that real quick. So those 4 categories are in the law, the new law that came through, and TEC will not be prioritizing one category over the other. It's just more recognition. An example I'll give, our process used up to last year did not take into consideration that an airport might go through one of the TCATs, a roadway might go through one of the TCATs. That's an immediate need. That's an extenuating circumstance. We want to be able to better reveal that to state lawmakers, but there's not going to be a categorization between them.
So it's more of like buckets
Yep.
that you're
Yes.
just.
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
Dick,
Yes, sir.
try not to drive you crazy here. I apologize in advance. If I understood your slide a minute ago, I think you said we have 11,025,015 square feet. That's
Yes, sir.
And that's across all
That's correct.
community colleges and all TCATs.
That's
everything.
correct.
That's that, and I guess I should think of that as probably conditioned space. Is that a good way to think about it?
That's our, we have, it's based off of E&G square footage, which is the education and general use space, as opposed to gross space and auxiliary space. But pretty much on the TCATs in the community colleges, all our square footage falls under E&G.
Okay.
In the universities, athletics, housing, and those are auxiliary enterprises, so those wouldn't be counted. So this is pretty much the gross square footage that we have across our whole system.
The 11 million is gross.
That's good.
Okay, good. And then I think you said the replacement cost is about 4.701 billion.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, there it is right in front of my face, sorry. And if I do my basic math right, that says the replacement cost is about $426 per square foot. Is that a number? What? That's what you're doing, yeah, okay, you got your, I thought you did it in your head, you actually got your phone in. So is that a good number to think about?
Yeah, so there's a kind of a formula, and there's a breakdown of different types of facilities that they fall into. And some of this we get from, I think, THEC tracks. Some of it, a lot of it we get, I think, risk management tracks those things.
So you're building that up by category, that
Yeah,
makes
that's
perfect
correct.
sense.
So if you had some spaces, you might have a large space that's going to be less expensive to rebuild, like one of the arenas at the colleges, as opposed to some other one. So that's kind of a blended cost when you start breaking those things out.
Got it. And would that include, I assume that would not include any kind of equipment?
Yes, sir. That's just the building.
It's just the building itself?
That's
No
correct.
equipment included? Some of
Yes.
which we buy, some of which gets donated, understand that?
That's correct.
And then, I guess, would that also impute an A&E fee and site work cost too? in coming
There's
up with those?
now the site work is fairly, because that would be like a replacement. So that would be building it pretty much back at the site that it was. So the site utility infrastructure cost would be fairly low, but would be in that cost.
Okay, and A&E also? I
The
assume.
fees aren't included in that.
Okay,
So fees, when you bring a project forward, the state has a basic design fee formula that would be on top of that.
on top of that, okay.
Again, those are, a lot of those categories we work with risk management on, and that's kind of based off of what they're tracking as far as the state's exposure to the cost of rebuilding facilities.
Just to stick something in my head, would that be like an 8% number roughly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, so that's, so 426 times 1.08, that's kind of a rough,
Yes, sir. Yeah.
All right.
There'd be some other incidental cost testing and things on top of that, but yes, sir, you'd be in that range.
it's a daunting number. Construction costs have gone up a lot in the past couple of years, and they don't seem to be coming down, so.
Yes, and again, we've been working with risk management since I've been here, because initially those numbers that they were tracking were real low. And so we've been able to get them to adjust that. And I think what that does is, and again, not speaking for risk management, when they're looking at getting state insurance, property insurance,
Sure.
obviously that would increase the premium. So it took time for us to build some of those costs up and work with that. So what we did in working with risk management, because I don't know where they gathered their numbers from, we started taking historic data for buildings that we were building, and we were using that to help, build that back.
Okay, it's very, very helpful. Thank you very much. It's complicated.
So we don't self-insure any of that property? We buy insurance on all those?
So the state of
11
Tennessee is self-insured, but basically the self-insurance now, I think, is pretty much, they have about a $500 million deductible, right? So, and we've gone through this, I've gone through it in rebuilding the campuses after tornadoes, Austin, Peay, Ball State. And so what the state does is they'll fund that. There's the deductible that the campus has to pay. And then we've worked with the state, who in turn will try to go to FEMA to try to recover some of the cost of the self-insured portion. So they're always trying to maintain that, because again, basically, and I don't know what it is per event, but that goes against what the state's holding for their insured part. So all facilities are owned by the state and they are insured by the state. I believe it's something like that. I mean, pretty much when you talk to the state, they'll say we're self-insured, but we have a carrier that we have to work with the most recent was we rebuilt the facilities at TSU after the tornado, and we work with the carrier because I think their position is they want to protect, they want to not expend the deductible, because once they get through that, then it gets into the carrier has to cover the difference.
I have one related to that I had not thought about until they were asking that question. If I remember correctly, one of the later slides, over the next 5 years, about $2 billion in expenditures.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Some portion of that is capital expansion to expand that square footage, I assume, then, if we're talking about
Yes, sir. So
$4 billion worth.
Yeah, so I think we have projects this year. We have projects that obviously we have that we've carried over the next year and then can be carried over. We do a kind of a projection. We don't have projects for the future years, but again, we go back in, we have the master plans at each of the campuses. We look at what those needs may be. We assign basically what we think of value to that, so that we're able to give them a potential budget number, but not knowing what our needs would be, not knowing what we get funded this year. So those projects could roll into next year and that kind of thing.
Is outlay largely square
That's
footage
correct.
expansion? That's what the outlay number is?
Yeah, but it's a combination. There's some expansion. A lot of what we're looking at doing and what we've been tracking for years is we're not seeing as much expansion across the system in higher ed in general. So we're looking at the replacement cost of actually replacing facilities in future years.
Replacing square footage.
Yeah,
Okay.
where we'd make a more effective facility like we did with the current TCAP project. So we're looking at, and then making those buildings more flexible.
Okay.
And obviously what that does is that would reduce our future capital maintenance because we'd have newer facilities.
Okay. And my other question was, you don't have to go back to the other slide, but the THEC target, is that considered like a floor or a ceiling, or
so
try to land as close as you can?
Yeah. So THEC has a formula. We always used a similar formula at TBR, and it was a published formula, and it takes in replacement cost, takes in the age of the buildings, and it takes a percentage of that. And all that does is generates a number. And so we've always used that. And basically that is when you have an enterprise of 11 million square feet, that's what they're saying you should be putting back in for capital maintenance on an annual basis. So the THEC has a different formula. It's fairly close to the one we had. And so when you run that formula, it uses the same kind of metrics, but that's the number that you would come up with. Again, what we look at, and so what happens is that if you replace a building today, if in that period of time, if you have new buildings coming online, obviously the ages change, so the maintenance costs could go down, or it could stabilize based off of factoring in an increase in just those costs. I think I've been asked by a couple about the current projects and the impact of the tariffs and the impact of on the labor market with ICE. And so on the tariffs, we started looking at when and it's not the first time we've had that conversation since I've been at the board, not at the level. The issue with tariffs is that in our current contracts, the discussion is the tariff a tax? And if the tariff is a tax, our contract says when the contractor signs it, he's responsible for all taxes currently or anything that comes in place during that period of time. And we've had meetings with the architects, the engineers, the ABC, the AGC. Again, you know, I don't think anybody thought about the bigger impact, because as soon as those came into effect, we started getting letters and calls from contractors asking us to have a contingency, and I've heard 5, 10, all kinds of numbers. So we want to be fair, and so we'd have to look what the impact. Our position is what we've told them would be, if we thought that there was some relief given that we could give to them, we would have to know what that amount of that tariff was on the product that they were asking for the additional. So that we would have to get involved in looking, basically auditing their contracts, their subcontracts to that level. So we would have to know. And I said, now what'll happen is that we have to be clear that your subcontractor didn't underbid something and he's trying to make up the difference. Or that in his contract, he already had some kind of a contingency built in. So I said, we want to be fair, but it's going to take a lot of effort for us to get to that point. At this time, we've had nothing because again, on the current projects, what we started telling them as we saw the tariffs, that if they needed to contract out, if we signed a contract and they had not gone out and secured one of their trade supplies contract, and they had plenty of time, that we would give them no relief on that. So they needed to go out there and contract those. And so right now there's been no impact. Again, what we did was we went back, I think I looked at 10 years of change orders for our projects, and it's probably about $2 billion worth of projects, probably over almost 7,000 change orders. We carry contingency. So in those change orders, we break them down to errors, omissions, hidden conditions, code issues. So if you look at that, our average percentage across the 2 billion is about 1.3%. So if you said, if we were carrying a 4% contingency, we would still have some money in there. There's probably another 2% of change orders, but those are programmatic and things we change and add. We would just not issue those if that was the issue. So we do have some capacity that we could work with the contractors to keep those projects going. The issue that we've been asked about the labor market is, again, back in 2006, Governor Bredesen issued an executive order that prohibited the state of Tennessee with contracting that the contractors couldn't employ I think it says illegal aliens. When we were presented that, we incorporated that language and then it was, I guess, it was signed in legislation that year. But the executive order at that time it went in effect when they issued the executive order, which was 2 or 3 months. So TBR put in the current general conditions that they can employ, and that those same conditions has to be contracted with the subcontractors. So what they have to do in every contract since then, and this includes architects and engineers, they have to sign an attestation form. I think contractors, it's at least twice a year, twice during the contract period, or twice a year, and even the architects, and basically attest that they're not doing that. So again, that's not had any impact on us on the construction side, because if it impacts them under their current contract, they have to keep the project staffed and funding. Hey.
That's one narrow question. So I assume we use the E-Verify system that the feds have up?
So
our contractors do?
We don't do, when we're looking at contractors, obviously there's the bonds, insurance.
Right.
The only, our verification is basically with the licensing board on their license requirements.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions? Great discussion. If not, is there a motion to approve the recommendations as presented?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Greg, do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And again, this item requires a roll call vote. So Secretary Perry, I'll ask you to call the roll, please.
Regent George.
Aye.
Regent Harrell.
Aye.
Regent Kastner.
Aye.
Chairman White.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And this will complete our agenda for today. And assuming that there is no other business before the committee, I will call our Committee on Finance and Business Operations adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Regent White, very much. Next on our agenda this afternoon, we've got a little more work to do on personnel and compensation. Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, the one that we've been all waiting for. Calling the Committee on Personnel and Compensation of the Tennessee Board of Regents to order. And Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For two regents who are on electronically, when I call your name, can you please address our two questions? First, can you simultaneously hear and speak with others participating in the meeting? And second, are you alone in the room? If the answer to both questions is yes, you can simply answer yes to both. Anyone who is not alone should identify any other people present in the room with the regent. In addition, to establish a physical quorum, Regent Emily Reynolds is going to join the committee this afternoon. Regent Burdine.
Here.
Regent Hooper. Regent Hooper, if you are still with us, you may have to press *6 to unmute. Chairlady Powers.
Here.
Regent Stevenson. Regent Varlin. Regent White.
Here.
Regent
And yes to
Emily.
both.
Regent Emily Reynolds.
Here.
And Regent Hooper, are you with us? Regent Hooper, if you're with us, we are not able to hear you. Again, you may have to press that *6 to unmute. We will work on that in the background. Madam Chair, you have a quorum. Once we resolve Regent Hooper's audio, we may come back to ask him the two questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And with that, having a quorum, we'll proceed with the first item on the agenda and just interrupt me, Madam Secretary, at any point to let Regent Hooper in. The first item being approval of the minutes from the special call meeting on May 28th, 2025. Does anyone have any questions or corrections to those minutes? If not, I would appreciate a motion, please.
I'll move for approval.
Who was it? Thank you, Miles. And a second?
Second, Annie.
Thank you, Regent Varlin. With that, can we have a roll call vote, Madam Secretary?
Regent Burdine.
Aye.
Regent Hooper, just checking. Chairlady Powers.
Aye.
Regent Varlin.
Aye.
Regent White.
Aye.
And Regent Reynolds.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. With that item approved, I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and this is actually a combo 2-3 punch. This is the tenure and promotion recommendations at community colleges, and General Counsel Lapps has actually confirmed for us that we can consider those two together with one vote. So with that, I'd like to call, she's already up here, Vice Chancellor Jothany Reed to the podium, please, for the recommended proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair Powers, Chancellor, members of this committee. Here today present our annual recommendations for tenure promotion, starting with the community colleges for the 2025-26 year. This is really an important process where we recognize and affirm the contributions of faculty around their sustained excellence in the areas of teaching, service, and scholarship. I want to give a quick framework around how this process works. TBR provides the policy around tenure and promotion. which ensures consistency across the state, as well as guidance and transparency. There is college level variation. The colleges then develop their own policy in relation to the TBR policy, which allows some flexibility to account for their own organizational structure, as well as the governance model at the college level. This is a process that requires a lot of deep thought and reflection. They do not come to these decisions easily. The review process can range from 9 months to 14 months from the point of a faculty applying for this process to being approved. So it is a process that the presidents and their teams take very seriously. Also, every campus also has an appeals process as part of their tenure and promotion procedure, and this ensures faculty have a structured pathway to raise any concerns around a decision with this. It's also important to note that salary adjustments are also typically tied to the promotions as well as part of their professional growth. If we look at community colleges this year, we're happy to report that 74 faculty members are being recommended for tenure, which is an increase from 66 last year, and again reflects the continued commitment of those institutions to support long-term faculty engagement. On the promotion side, 173 community college faculty are being recommended to you all for advancement. Again, this reflects our healthy progression in faculty development across the system. Each of these recommendations have been vetted at the college level and approved by their president and thoroughly reviewed by the Academic Affairs Office. This community college promotion and tenure recommendations will require a vote, but I will highlight the TCAT process as well before we get to that. For the TCATs, those faculty members have also gone through a rigorous institutional review process. These recommendations have been certified by the TCAT president and also fully reviewed by the academic affairs staff who support their approval. If we look at the numbers for the TCAT, this year we're recommending 66 promotions, 44 promotions to instructor, 15 to senior instructor, 7 to master instructor. There are no recommendations for tenure this cycle. And again, all of these recommendations have followed the proper channel for review, and we recommend approval for this. At this time, we would ask for a vote.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to say, I'm just delighted and just grateful for this high caliber of faculty that we have and thrilled to be presenting this recommendation. So are there any questions?
No questions, but one quick comment. I can't help but resist to mention that in that one of those being promoted to a master instructor is a former regent, one of our faculty regents, Larry Autry from Northwest Tennessee.
Cool.
So congratulations to Larry.
Hearing section. That's great. Thank you so much, Chair Lady. Are there any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I will call for a motion on both the community college and TCAT tenure promotion requirements. Anyone from my committee willing to do that?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you so much. And we will have a roll call vote again, Madam Secretary. Thank you.
Regent Burdine.
Aye.
Regent Hooper. Chair Lady Powers.
Aye.
Regent Varlin.
Aye.
Regent White.
Aye.
Regent Reynolds.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much.
Thank
The
you,
next
Madam Chair.
item on the agenda will be, and I know I'm going to be calling Vice Chancellor Fox and both of you back and forth here, but the fourth item is review and approval of faculty promotion increases. Vice Chancellor Fox.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Before you know for consideration are the salary increases that go along with the faculty promotions that Dr. Reed just presented to you. You should have the details of those increases in your advanced materials. In summary, the community college increases total $458,682 for the 173 promotions, and the TCAT increases total $331,686 for their 66 promotions. TBR staff has verified the proposed ranks of the individuals submitted for promotion by the institutions and ensured a corresponding increase for those that were eligible. Madam Chair, TBR staff recommends approval of the promotional increases for the 173 community college faculty and the 66 TCAT faculty. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you may have any.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chancellor Fox. Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Miles. Is there a second? Danny?
Second.
Thank you, Danny. With that, we will have another roll call vote. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Regent Burdine,
Aye.
Regent Hooper, Chair Lady Powers,
Aye.
Regent Varlin,
Aye.
Regent White,
Aye.
and Regent Reynolds. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. With that item approved, moving to the next item. Item 5 is the institutional requests for new and amended compensation plans. And Chancellor Fox.
Thank you. In accordance with TBR Guideline P-043 compensation, the following proposed compensation plan methodology have been submitted for approval and were included in your advanced materials. All new plans were guided by the third-party consultant Performance Point. The submissions include the following institutions: Pellissippi State Community College, Volunteer State Community College, and the TBR System Office Staff Plan. In summary, Pellissippi is proposing a new compensation plan as their current plan was last completed in 2014. Volunteer State Community College is proposing a revision to their existing plan to be more flexible to meet market changes, and the TBR System Office is proposing a new plan for our System Office staff. The current plan was last completed for the System Office in 2012, although salary ranges have been indexed every year to be competitive with market data. You may recall that the TCATs, including faculty, staff, and TCAT presidents, as well as the community college presidents and the chancellor, are on their own compensation plan, and that was last revised in 2022. The newer revised compensation plans were reviewed within the System Office by a committee of 5 individuals from the following offices: Finance, Academic Affairs, Policy and Strategy, and 2 individuals from Human Resources. The committee reviewed the proposed plan for methodology, market data being used, equity, consistency, completeness, and clarity. After reviewing the proposed plans, the committee respectfully recommends board approval of the proposed revisions of these compensation plans.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Fox. Are there any questions?
I'll move for approval.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you. Y'all were on the ball that time. We'll have a roll call vote, please.
Regent Burdine,
Aye.
Regent Hooper, Chair Lady Powers,
Aye.
Regent Varlin,
Aye.
Regent White,
Aye.
Regent Reynolds.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you all very much for that, which brings us to the final item on the agenda. Item 7 is evaluation of the chancellor pursuant to board policy of performance. I'm sorry. Boy, I just jumped right over that.
That's
Thank
not
you.
mine.
I was in a hurry.
You're very efficient.
I usually try to just click along, don't I? I'll go on. Sorry.
I'll second that.
I'll go on to 6 before I go to 7. The executive incentive payments. And back to you, Vice Chancellor Fox, one more time.
Thank you. The Executive Performance Incentive Plan was approved at the June 2013 board meeting. It was created at the request of board members to address the gap between average market salaries for the presidents and the chancellor and the current compensation level for these officials. The plan provides an opportunity for leaders to earn up to 10% the market value of their respective position on an annual basis. This is based on institutional and individual performance. 85% of the 10% is metric-based, and 15% of the 10 is discretionary based. The incentive plan does not add to the base salary for the position and is recalculated each year based on established performance metrics. Participants in the plan include the presidents of the community colleges, TCATs, and the chancellor. A separate attachment for the community college presidents with individual amounts was included in your materials in advance today. Due to the data not being available until after this meeting, I will be bringing the TCAT president and the chancellor incentive payments to you at the September board meeting for consideration. Chair Powers, this completes my presentation. I'm happy to answer additional questions if needed.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Fox. Any discussion or questions?
I'll move for approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Call for a roll call vote, please, ma'am.
Regent Burdine,
Aye.
Regent Hooper, Chair Lady Powers,
Aye.
Regent Varlin,
Aye.
Regent White,
Aye.
Regent Reynolds.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you so much. And now to the final item that I tried to jump to early, because I'm just excited about this. This is the good stuff. Pursuant to the board policy, and this is the evaluation of the chancellor, a performance review of the chancellor is required every 2 years. Additionally, pursuant to policy, the vice chair assigned to the Committee on Personnel and Compensation the task of conducting this review and reporting to the board. I consider that a distinct pleasure and honor. To facilitate this work, the Vice Chair and I took the steps outlined in the memo in our materials which you have received. Included in those materials were the competency ratings that we received. A high degree of satisfaction in the Chancellor's abilities and support for her leadership from a broad spectrum of constituencies is included by these three things. 1, positive ratings provided, Chancellor. 2, a careful review of the Chancellor's self-assessment, which I think everyone received and read. And 3, the quality and quantity of her accomplishments. So in summary, I find that Chancellor Tiding's overall performance exceeds requirements for this period, and she is deserving of high praise. So with that, is there any questions or discussion? Hearing none?
I'll move for approval.
Thank you.
I'm second.
Thank you. And that is the Chancellor's evaluation and categorize her performance as exceeds requirements. That is the motion on the floor with a second, and I will ask for a roll call vote.
Regent Burdine.
Aye.
Regent Hooper. Chairlady Powers.
Aye.
Regent Barlin.
Aye.
Regent White.
Aye.
And Regent Reynolds. Motion carries unanimously.
Should I say woohoo?
I will.
Woohoo! Mark
Thanks
said
for
I
not
could.
changing my email.
If there's no further business before this committee, or is there? Don't think so. Hearing none, the Committee on Personnel and Compensation for the Tennessee Board of Regents stands adjourned. Chair Lady, back to you.
Well done. Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have another enthusiastic regent. And it's Regent Danny Varlin for the Committee on External Affairs, please, ma'am.
Yeehaw. I'm calling the Committee on External Affairs to order. Secretary Perry, would you please call the roll?
Regent DeWitt.
Here.
Regent Harrell.
Present.
Regent Powers.
Here.
Regent Spurgeon. Chairlady Barlin.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Executive Vice Chancellor for External Affairs, Ms. Kim McCormick, who will kick us off on the hearing about all the informational legislative updates.
Well,
No
good
going to
afternoon.
sleep.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Reynolds, Chair Lady Varlin, Chancellor, members of the committee. I just want to say, you know you're getting old when you're sitting in the seat and your leg falls asleep and you don't know if you're going to be able to make it up here or not, but I did, so I'm here. As you all know, Matthew Gann has now officially moved on to his exciting new position with the University of Denver. While he will be missed, I do want you to know that the department will be in very good hands. I would like to announce to you all that our own AVC John Williams, who is in charge of government relations, is now going to manage the Department of Marketing, Digital Strategy, and Public Relations. So the new name of the department is the Department of Public Relations and Government Relations. I will tell you that John is highly qualified for this work. He spent many years at Lipscomb University working in both enrollment services and marketing communications, public relations. He was the director of Marcom at Lipscomb before he moved on to law school. When he completed law school, he wanted to spread his wings a bit from Lipscomb because he had been a student there as well. So he moved on to the General Assembly where he worked in legal services. And from there, we were very fortunate to get him here at TBR. So I just want to congratulate John. I'm proud of him.
Yeah, he's here. He's probably
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, he's right down. There he is. So today, John and I will be providing a briefing of the legislation passed this session that impacts TBR. As you know, the Tennessee General Assembly adjourned for the year in April 22nd. And over the course of the session, the Government Relations team tracked 658 bills of more than 1,700 bills that were filed. And guess what? That was actually a low number of bills to be filed. So, but 1,700. And I am so thankful for the work that John did, Patrick Boggs, who is here, Mason Berry. Our intern, Sarah Lang, was just absolutely wonderful. Since session, they have been preparing our compilation of the bills that we have been monitoring this session, and we do this every year, and that is complete, and you actually have a hard copy of that on your desk, and that is also compiled on our website, at TBR website every year, so you can look back at it historically if you would like. But in regard to that legislation, let's start with the first slide. First up, we have Senate Resolution 11, number 12 and number 13. These are the resolutions that passed unanimously, I must say, and confirm the appointments of our three regents, Regent Nisha Powers, Regent Deanne Witt, and Regent Jeremy Harrell. So congratulations to all of you. Okay, and moving on, Chancellor Tidings presented the TBR budget at both the House Finance, Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Ed Committee this year. Those presentations went very well as expected, and members were very supportive of our budget request, and you will be hearing about those very soon as well. Chair Lady Varlin, with your permission, I'd like to invite John Williams up to complete the rest of our report.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Please
here he
do.
comes.
Switch places. Thank you, Dr. McCormick, Vice Chair Reynolds, Regent Varlin, and members of the board. Next slide, please. I'll go through a listing of some of the notable bills that we tracked this session and how they ended up. First up, Senate Bill 933, House Bill 919, became Public Chapter 452. It revises the compensation and appointment processes for public higher education governing boards in Tennessee. It expands the Tennessee Board of Regents from 19 to 21 members and gives the Lieutenant Governor and the House Speaker the authority to appoint 2 at-large members to our board. They'll get 2 appointments now and then 2 additional appointments when 2 of our at-large members roll off. Senate Bill 1316, House Bill 1330 is an administration bill that impacts various boards and commissions. For us, it simplifies the process of holding electronic meetings. Previously, you'll remember we had to formally declare and vote on the necessity to meet electronically. That requirement has been removed. The legislation adds a requirement that we must provide advance notice if a board member plans to participate electronically. And then additionally, we'll need to make some small adjustments to our standard meeting notice language, and that one did pass. Senate Bill 689 places the Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation under the governance of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. It dissolved TSAC's independent board and also ends the Tennessee Teaching Scholars and Minority Teaching Fellows programs, but TSAC will continue managing any existing loans that are still out there. Senate Bill 1368, House Bill 1227 is legislation brought forward by the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, and I'll highlight a few of the key changes that it introduced. First, it expanded the definition in the code of quality non-degree credential to include registered apprenticeships and occupational licensure. It revises THEC's tuition and fee authority to set an annual maximum tuition increase and allows for separate increases for differing institutions based on need. It updates THEC's role in the capital investment process, like Dick was talking about earlier, by removing the prioritization requirement and emphasizing analysis and categorization over ranking. It also allows THEC to delegate academic program approval authority and off-campus site approval to its executive director. Senate Bill 1312, House Bill 1324 was a bill that didn't make it across the finish line this year, but it would have changed the name of the Wilder Navy Technical Skills Grant to the Tennessee Works Scholarship and increased the amount of the scholarship to the full cost of tuition and mandatory fees at our TCATs. The bill has a $12 million fiscal note impacting lottery funds, so members decided to wait to move that one forward. Senate Bill 1291 makes changes to the Strong Act tuition reimbursement program for Tennessee National Guard members by removing its June 30, 2025 expiration date. It increases the maximum reimbursable credit hours from 120 to 130 and removes the 8th semester limit for students. Senate Bill 172, House Bill 7, was another bill that didn't make it all the way through, and similar to one we saw last year, it would have created a hunger-free campus grant program administered by THEC to address hunger on our campuses. public and private across the state. It passed out of the education committees, but didn't get funded in the budget. And the same with the next one, passed out of education, didn't end up getting the funding. But the Tennessee Promise Completion Grant Pilot Program provides eligible Pell Grant students enrolled in Tennessee Promise program up to $1,000 per semester to address non-tuition expenses that may impact their progress. The program is set to expire January 1st of 2026. This bill would have made that a permanent program as well, but didn't end up moving forward. Senate Bill 644, House Bill 865 permits TBR institutions to offer dual enrollment programs in pre-practical and practical nursing to qualified high school students beginning in the 10th grade and above, which will expand opportunities for high school students to enter the healthcare field. Senate Bill 950, House Bill 958, this one's a tongue twister, establishes the Federal Education Deregulation Cooperation Task Force to help the state prepare for potential changes in federal laws, regulations, and guidance related to K-12 education. Senate Bill 376, House Bill 377 prohibits four-year public and private colleges from using race, color, ethnicity, or national origin in admissions or financial aid decisions, including affirmative action practices, and requires institutions to notify relevant staff before the next academic year. Senate Bill 937, House Bill 1270 states that students, faculty, employees, or contractors at public colleges and universities are not required to use someone's preferred name or pronouns if they don't match the person's legal name or sex. It also protects individuals from civil liability for choosing to use or not use certain names or pronouns. Senate Bill 251, House Bill 313, requires retirees who are members of the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System to have a bona fide break in service before temporary reemployment, limits duration and compensation of such work, and sets specific teaching limits for retired higher education faculty. Then every year we see a few tuition and fee waiver and discount bills that are all going to many deserving groups. However, these waivers and discounts are largely unfunded and have to be absorbed by college budgets, which can sometimes be a strain. This shows a few of those that were proposed this year, but none of those ended up passing. And then a few more that didn't make it all the way across the finish line. Senate Bill 719, House Bill 704 would have allowed students to use the Wilder-Navy Reconnect Grant and the Wilder-Navy Technical Skills Grant at Moore Tech in Shelby County, and this is one we've opposed in the past. Senate Bill 803, House Bill 738 would have allowed students to use Tennessee Promise scholarships at institutions accredited by the National Accrediting Commission of Career Arts and Sciences, so certain cosmetology programs across the state. But only if no enrollment slots were available at a TCAT in the students' community, and that one was taken off notice. Senate Bill 1085, House Bill 777 would have allowed students to receive state-funded lottery financial aid at private post-secondary institutions domiciled in Tennessee that are not fully accredited but are on the path to their candidates for regional accreditation. Then two more, Senate Bill 1409, House Bill 1121, would have expanded eligibility for the dual enrollment grant to include students who are sophomores in high school going to a community college. And then finally, one that the Nashville Chamber worked on, Senate Bill 709, House Bill 663, would have established a grant program to provide up to $3,000 in tuition assistance for students enrolling in eligible non-credit workforce programs, which is something we support. So I know I flew through those, but that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, and if not, I'll turn it over to Dr. McCormick in Regent Barlow.
I do have a question.
Thank you.
Is there, I know that this was something in the past, working with the legislature to lower the reconnect age from 24 to, I think it was 21. Are you aware of any conversation around trying to pick that ball back up and get it over the finish line, or is it just?
That has been included in our legislative priorities in the past. That was not one we took forward this year, though.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Chancellor Tidings was looking at me real quick to add to that. We did actually have a list of, goodness, 12, 13 ideas for lottery expansions this year that we did bring forward to the governor in the fall. And then the lottery revenue kind of fell out And so any ideas, and that was one of the ideas that TBR advocated for, and we gladly accepted it. Due to the lottery revenue decline, we advised the administration not to move forward with expansions.
Thank you.
I have a question, just tagging on what Steve was just saying with the lottery. Do you have sort of a high-level summary of where that revenue is and where it, is there a projection on how that will continue to evolve? Is that, that's it. Sorry, Stephen.
First of all, after we leave tonight, let's go to the local gas station and buy some lottery tickets.
Sure.
I don't know what the most recent estimate was. We got a third quarter update, and it's still down from last year. The complicating aspect of it is that we used to have sports betting go directly towards higher education. It will still go towards higher education if there is a downfall, if there's a deficit, I should say. But right now, it's otherwise slated to go towards K-12 maintenance due to the special session. There are complicating hypotheses on why revenue is down. Is it because of sports betting? That might explain a little bit of it, but I'm not quite sure why. So we don't know if this is a one-year blip or if this is just to continue going forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have anything else to say?
Yes, I do, Chair Lady Vol. There's a group we forgot to thank, and that's our general counsel and all of the attorneys in the office who spend hours helping us go through the legislation. So thank you, Brian. You're great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further business to come before the committee? Well, hearing none, the Committee on External Affairs for the Tennessee Board of Regents is adjourned.
Thank you, Regent Varlin. And we will put a big finish on the day with the Committee on Workforce Development, chaired by Regent George. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Rounding third and headed home. Calling the Committee on Workforce Development to order. Secretary Perry, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For this committee, in order to establish a physical quorum, Regent Emily Reynolds will also be joining in. Chairman George,
Here.
Regent Hooper, Regent Couchin,
Present.
Regent Powers,
Here.
Regent Spurgeon, Regent Stevenson, Regent Emily Reynolds.
Here, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. At this time, I'd like to call on the Executive Vice Chairman for External Affairs, Kim McCormick, who will give us, who will open up so we can prepare to hear a few informational reports on the 24-25 THEC reporting cycle and 10 works.
So good afternoon again, everyone. Chairman George, members of the committee. As a reminder, the Workforce Development Committee meets twice a year. So that this committee meets in June and then again in September. Before we move to that agenda, I do want to brief you on a new executive order that came out on Tuesday of this week. Governor Bill Lee signed Executive Order 109, ensuring Tennessee continues to lead the nation in workforce development by demonstrating an innovative strategy to meet the needs of the state's dynamic and growing labor market. The order strengthens the state's Workforce Development Board's work by requiring a unified, results-driven approach that aligns education and training with the evolving needs of employers in high-growth industries. Since taking office, Governor Lee has made significant investments in workforce development, as we all know, including those that directly impact TBR, such as investing the $1 billion to complete the TCAT master plan, to improve existing TCATs, replace outdated facilities, and build new TCATs at strategic locations across Tennessee, establishing the governor's investment in vocational education, the GIVE Act, to expand access to vocational and technical training for students. Through the governor's investment in vocational education, the Lee administration has served 15,500 rural students, helped spark 41,500 new jobs, as well as almost $19 billion in capital investment across rural Tennessee. And during this past legislative session, His administration made significant investments in workforce development, including $6.3 million to create a statewide micro-credentialing program to develop short-term targeted certifications that equip Tennesseans with high-demand skills identified by industry and state partners. $10 million more in funding for the GIVE grants to support nuclear workforce education as recommended by the Nuclear Energy Advisory Council, and Dr. Sisk will talk more about that in just a moment. $4 million to expand the State Workforce Development Board's role in planning workforce strategies, identifying high-demand industries, and awarding grants to grow Tennessee's skilled workforce. $5 million to create Tennessee Works, a partnership between the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development, Labor and Workforce Development, Education, Human Services, THEC, and TBR. This is to create customized workforce training programs tailored to the specific needs of incoming and existing businesses. Dr. Sisk and I both serve on the core planning team, along with members from THEC, from Dr. Gentile's group. And then Dr. Tidings serves on the leadership team. And I think it's very important for all of us that Dr. Tidings is on that leadership team. She brings great experience from her work in a former state down south of us that did have something very similar to this in place. She also asks the tough questions in the meetings. Her goal is to make sure that this is as best as it can be, because this is something very important to Governor Lee, and it's also something very important to Dr. Tidings. And to support the TBR Workforce Initiative with TN Works, over $2.2 million investment came to us of TBR for the Center for Workforce Development to expand the workforce pipeline for Tennessee's business and industries through technical program training, promotion, and recruitment efforts. These are unprecedented investments in technical training, and we could not be more thankful to Governor Lee for that investment. So to continue on with this and to explain in more detail, Regent George, at this time, with your permission, I'd like to invite Dr. Sisk to go into more detail about the actual report to THEC and Tennessee Works and how Tennessee Works will impact the Center for Workforce Development.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Regent George, Vice Chair Reynolds, Chancellor Tidings, members of the Workforce Committee. Just a quick update on THEC Workforce Report that we do annually for our community colleges for the benefit of the new board members, and as a reminder for our existing board members, the Complete College Tennessee Act of 2010 requires public community colleges and universities to be funded using a comprehensive outcomes-based funding formula. And since its inception, that has always included a workforce training metric at our community colleges to recognize the importance of supporting local workforce development. Institutions provide programs and activities, local businesses, industry partners, community members, think apprenticeship programs and things like that. So it's an incredibly important part. One of the few states in the country that incentivizes workforce training is Tennessee. That's how far looking ahead we are. So I appreciate that. These workforce training activities were reported through my office and then eventually onto THEC annually. And Regent Gentile, your staff at THEC is tremendous to work with. So we really enjoy that. This is a snapshot of a 7-week reporting cycle. We do this every year. It's a bit of an iterative back and forth kind of thing. One important caveat on that is for outcomes-based funding purposes, this funding cannot carry institutional credit towards a degree or some type of academic award because you can't double dip, right? So this is a snapshot of what we've done in the past with our community colleges. I presented this last year. In the 23-24 reporting period, the colleges delivered a little over 1.4 million hours total. System-wide was a 13.5% increase. Regent George, as per our previous conversation that we had, we've got data going back to 2015. That was a little over 600,000 hours total, so we've more than doubled since 2015. So once THEC finalizes their approved workforce hours for the 24-25 year, that's going to be in September 26th. I'll add a column to this with the final numbers there. The September board meeting is on September 19th, so we won't have the exact final numbers there, but I have some really solid numbers to present. Last year, we only had about at the end of that reporting cycle, we had about 3% hours submitted were rejected, which is an all-time low. So that's doing a fantastic job by our community colleges. On a side note here, what Dr. McCormick mentioned about investments in the Center for Workforce Development, that's going to include money for a common LMS for our workforce side of our community college operations, and it's going to simplify this process. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about TN Works. Dr. McCormick talked about it. This is the governor's signature workforce development initiative as we move forward here. It's a new workforce collaboration strategy, part of his overall strategy. TN Works is what we're calling it, not Tennessee Works, but TN Works. We're going to operationalize a one-stop workforce model within the hub, integrating agencies and stakeholders into a cohesive, outcome-oriented system driven by a collaborative governance framework, enabling data-driven decision-making and targeted workforce interventions. State Workforce Board is going to be the administrative head for TN Works, but as Dr. McCormick mentioned, the various commissioners, agency heads, including our chancellor, will serve on the leadership board itself. We are active participants in the planning cycle for TN Works right now. I'm excited to be a part of putting something together at this level. Our colleges within TBR are at the tip of the spear for workforce development in Tennessee. We're excited to be a part of this. Next slide, please. The vision for TN Works is for Tennessee to be the number one state in the country for economic success for our businesses and our residents. And our vision, there's some strategies here that I don't want to go into too much detail, but you'll have it with you. Just some high-level strategies there. It's the hub. It's a Sherpa model, a front-facing one-stop shop for prospective industry looking to locate in Tennessee or for existing industry looking to expand in Tennessee. The big thing is we'll be monitoring key performance indicators as we go across, and it applies with every agency partner within the hub itself. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a slide that I got from TN Works. We're using a consulting group called Accenture to help build this out. There's some in-scope projects, out-of-scope projects, but don't get hung up on that. But the strategy is to focus on critical workforce priorities as determined by a combination of the state's workforce board, the governor's priorities, and areas where a prepared workforce can drive economic development and expansion, kind of future-focused on emerging trends. And you heard about the GIVE grants are going to focus on the nuclear industry, those emerging industries like that. The GIVE grant process is driven by THEC. I think Mitch Curry still is going to do that for Dr. Gentile on the GIVE grants. And historically in the GIVE grant processes, our TBR colleges, both TCATs and community colleges, are right in the middle of the mix on all of those. We've been very successful in getting GIVE grants. The initiatives that link to ECD priorities are a big deal. We're doing some work right now with the Tennessee Tile Valley. It's kind of a collaborative for ceramic tile manufacturing. We're doing a lot of work in that space right now. A focus on new projects, as I mentioned, attraction and expansion of business development, high quality jobs defined by income, jobs where the demand for the workforce exceeds the available supply. A lot of things go on there. Note, agency-specific projects, think the apprenticeship programs of our colleges are not in scope for TN Works, so that's going to remain with the colleges. There's an out-of-scope note here that says hospitality, tourism, healthcare, and aerospace are out-of-scope projects. I asked Commissioner Thomas that clarifying question with an inquisitive look on my face, and she said that was based on some early work by the consulting group, and she can assure everybody, including the board, that those are not out of scope for TN Works. Next slide, please. All this ties back to my workforce development defined slide that I always like to throw up there. Workforce development is the coordination of public and private sector policies, and I'll stop there because the coordinator, the conductor of the orchestra for this, is TN Works and the hub within there, as per the governor's executive order. Next slide, please. It's a model for the future, the TN Works Hub. Consider this, and Regent Burdine and others who are involved in chamber work, ECD work, leading states position workforce development as a core economic driver. Think about Georgia Quick Start, Virginia Fast Forward. Workforce talent is a strategic asset, just like infrastructure, just like energy, just like shovel-ready sites in all the states. Workforce talent is a key strategic asset. Next slide, please. So I'll stop there. I don't want to be between you and changing and going back to the hotel room for the end of the meeting, but I'll stop there, pause for any questions you may have. It's an exciting time to be working in workforce development right now, particularly at the Board of Regents. Regent George, any questions?
I like the mission being the number one in the state, in the country for economic success for business and residents. I just think that's outstanding. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I have one quick question, and this is a new Regent question, so I apologize if this is redundant to those of you who have listened to these reports in the past, but could you just give me a high-level framework of the source of revenue that, or where the money comes from to pay for these workforce hours? Is it traditionally, are there a lot of state grants that are used to help pay those hours and the educators, or is it really just the business or the individual that's paying the tuition direct?
It's going to be a mix of all of those.
Yeah,
So
percentage.
businesses will invest in their employee infrastructure, their workforce talent. Think apprenticeships. So if we can leverage state grants and other scholarship opportunities, they'll do that. But businesses have a lot of skin in the game as well.
Is there kind of like a typical percentage that is coming from the state funding versus?
It's going to vary depending on what they're doing. Okay, so if you're talking about from an individual company perspective, they're going to lean on investing more of their own money in that as a part of their internal workforce pipeline. Give an example: one of the most difficult jobs to fill in a manufacturing organization are industrial maintenance technicians, multi-craft maintenance technicians. But every one of those businesses have identified talent out on their production line who can do that have the potential to do that type of work. And so they're going to work with their local college to get that person into an apprenticeship opportunity. And the college partner is going to do the related technical instruction, the lab instruction and things, and do the OJT. And so that's generally going to be paid for by the business, or they'll leverage some grant money that they can get.
There's a lot of scenarios where students are coming that don't have an employer, that they're building a skill to take back into the workforce.
Yeah, that's a part of this as well, kind of self-funded. You think Reconnect, I was at the TCAT Stanton campus a few weeks ago, and I looked in the industrial maintenance lab there, and what I saw were current employees at a couple of industries in Haywood County, because they had their name tags on, but they're working second shift at those companies and taking classes on the first shift, whether they're preparing to go to work at Blue Oval City or just upgrading their skill set for the current employer. I wasn't sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. McCormick, anything else to add to that?
Do not, unless there are further questions. That completes our report, and we are the last, I believe, of the reports today.
So any further business for this committee? Hearing none, the Committee on the Workforce Development for the Tennessee Board of Regents stands adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent George. Thank you all for being attentive and engaged this afternoon in our committee discussions. A couple of announcements, and then Jeff McCord, Dr. McCord, you might want to make your way up here as well. Housekeeping wise, for committee chairs, your committee reports and materials for tomorrow's meeting will be on the website later this afternoon, really for everyone, but for the committee chairs in particular, a copy of that committee report will be at the front desk when you return home for dinner to pick up for tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, we start at 9 a.m. Eastern, right here, with a presentation by Presidents McCord and McMillan to talk more about their respective institutions. And there he is. Jeff, come on up. Chancellor, before I call on Dr. McCord, any comments or announcements?
Again, just to thank everybody for their attention to our committee chairs this afternoon. Thank you very much for my evaluation. Thanks to all of those of you that wrote comments on that. There were so many kind comments, and I thank each of you for your time and attention to that. Thank you again to Northeast for hosting this.
Dr. McCord, what do we have in store this afternoon?
It's got to be read, doesn't it? Thank you. First of all, thank you all for being in Northeast Tennessee. We're glad you're here. We're always glad to get visitors, and many times people come and visit and they just don't go home. So if you want to stay, that's fine with me. Call your family or whoever you might have. So tonight, Regent Burdine, President McMillan, and I would like to invite you to dinner. The dinner is themed. We had a lot of questions about attire tonight, and the dinner is themed bluegrass, barbecue, and blue jeans. So it's obviously formal attire to come with. Now, you are encouraged to go casual because when you're eating barbecue, it's good not to have a tux on. So tonight,
Jeff,
and Guillermo, see if I forget
Hey, Jeff, let me
anything.
add something. My definition of casual is shorts.
Yeah, except for Burdine. Don't go with the Burdine. You can wear shorts if you want to, as long as they're jorts. You know, you have to wear blue jeans. So don't forget to bring your badge. There are tickets back on the back of the badge. And when you're there, find someone from Kingsport and ask them why that building that we're going to be in, Kingsport Farmers Market, was more discovered than constructed. Emily Reynolds knows the answer because we talked about it at lunch. And then ask them about the Kingsport Carousel and how that was fashioned from the citizens of Kingsport. I think it's going to be a unique experience there. So the buses, tonight's dinner begins at 6:30. Shuttles will start from Meadowview, 2 shuttles, one at 5:45 and one at 6:15. But it's 5 minutes from the hotel, so it's not a very long drive if you want to drive yourself. The buses will return. When will the buses return, Dr. Mendoza? 7:45 and 8:15 will be shuttling folks back to the hotel as well if you do not drive. We're looking forward to it. Should be a fun time. We'll have a few comments at the beginning, and then we'll just break bread together and have a nice time and just get to know each other a little better. So thanks again for being at Northeast State and for being in Northeast Tennessee, and we look forward to meeting tonight in Regent Burdine's hometown. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Now, this will be fun. Now, Miles, are you providing a separate shuttle for the after party on your deck that we've heard so much about following dinner?
I certainly can do that.
Okay. Have you invited the perpetrator back over for?
No,
Okay.
but I know where he lives.
Okay. Couldn't resist after the story. When was that? 2 board meetings ago, maybe 3? Oh, December 10th. Okay, he remembers it well. So, on a more serious note as we close here, I am struck by something that Dr. McCormick referenced, and not only are we great to have tremendous leadership in our chancellor, but as always, I'm always struck by the fact of just how much this governor has done for TBR and this state. And so it is with great appreciation. I know we all send his way. He was up here, as you said, just 48 hours ago. But he has invested in us, not just monetarily, but in more ways than one. So just a public thanks to our chairman and to our governor for his leadership. Any other questions, comments? No other business to come before us? Got a little time to catch up on your other life, your other work before we convene tonight, and we'll look forward to having some barbecue, listening to some bluegrass, and wearing your blue jeans here in a couple of hours. Thank you all. See you in the morning.